voice for Kalani, Tonga.
In January of 2021, my husband Finau went to work, had a massive heart attack, and never came home again. Finau's sister knocked on my door at 5:30 in the morning to tell me that he had collapsed at work, and I piled all of our kids into the car and rushed to the hospital. On our way there, my son Ovaka, who was 10 years old at the time, asked me, "Mom, will Dad be okay?" And I remember answering, "I don't know, buddy. I don't know if Daddy's gonna be okay, but whatever happens, we're gonna be okay." I've held on to that phrase, often with white knuckles and by my fingernails. Whatever happens, we're gonna be okay. Sometimes I feel confident as I repeat that back to myself, but over the past 4 years, the bar for what constitutes okay has been lowered many, many times, and the definition of okay has changed considerably. My mom and stepdad came to Utah from Texas for my husband's funeral, and they put their entire lives on hold for 7 weeks while they cared for me and my 5 children and helped us adjust to life without Finau. Those weeks flew by in a blur, but when my mom finally left, I truly felt alone for the very first time since Finau's passing. I'd lost other loved ones in my life, but it's very hard to describe the immensity of loss one feels when they lose their life partner. Our 5 children were a mess of grief, cycling between intense feelings of sadness, anger, apathy, and each of my children processed and managed this grief very differently. My oldest son, Eliasi, used humor to cope, and for about a year after Finau passed, anytime I would ask him to do something he didn't want to do, he would look at me and be like, "Wow, Mom, I can't believe you're asking me to do that. My dad just died." And, we would chuckle at the absurdity of the statement and then move on with our day. But my second-born son, Ovaka, did not take kindly to any joking about his dad's passing. And anytime Elias would crack a dead dad joke, Ovaka would absolutely lose his mind and make sure that everybody in a 3-block radius knew that his dad's death was not a laughing matter to him. All of my runts seemed to trigger the crap out of each other. And the person that I would usually lean on to support and for assistance to help me with our offspring was, he was dead. The crowning moment of triggering came one frigid night when the snow had turned to ice on the ground and the wind seemed to cut like glass as it whipped through our neighborhood. Eliasi made one joke too many, and my sensitive soul, Ovaka, with tears streaming down his face, fled our home in nothing but his sleep attire, which happened to be a t-shirt and basketball shorts. Fortunately, I had on a hoodie and pajama pants. Unfortunately, I only had on a hoodie and pajama pants. So I threw my running shoes on and I sprinted out into the cold after my son, hoping to shepherd my hurting child back home. I grossly underestimated the speed and tenacity of said child, and fairly quickly realized as he disappeared down our very busy street that I was no longer the athlete I had once been. It took about half an hour of chasing him before his little body was finally fatigued enough for him to stop and turn around. I rushed over to him, and he collapsed into my arms with a heart-wrenching wail and just kept repeating, my daddy, over and over, as I stroked his hair and held him close. You might think that the soul-crushing cries of a child grieving his dead parent is the low point of this story, but alas, you'd be mistaken. Because when Ovaka finally settled down enough for me to reassess our situation, I realized that we were almost a mile down our very busy street, and Ovaka was shoeless, poorly dressed, and shivering in my arms from both cold and exertion. I took my shoes off and shoved his little feet into them. And then I looked down at his youth large t-shirt, glanced down at my 3XL hoodie, and I knew I had a horrifying decision to make. Honestly, only a mother's love can account for what happened next. I told Ovaka to take his shirt off, and then, using the changing skills I had learned from years of competitive sports where you have to change uniforms in public areas sometimes, I ninja'd my very full-figured adult woman's body into a youth large t-shirt by threading it under my hoodie and pulling it on without exposing any of my adult woman parts to the many, many cars passing by on this busy street. I then removed my hoodie and threw it over Ovaka's head, making sure to pull the hoodie up over his freezing cold ears, tying it tightly around his little red face. It hung down past his knees and was, for all intents and purposes, something of a weighted blanket / sleeping bag combo, encasing him in warmth and comforting him with his heavy cocoon-like hug. With Ovaka taken care of, I turned my attention towards myself and realized, with equal parts utter horror and incredible amusement, that Ovaka had been wearing a Roblox shirt from a very specific game entitled Piggy. And that Piggy was now emblazoned across the front of me in large, bold print that was now squeezing all of my parts in a death grip, much like meat stuffed into a sausage casing. Not only this, but the shirt did not make it all the way down the length of my torso, thus showcasing a midriff that had not been exposed to the public for the better part of approximately 2 decades. So it was a mess of epic proportions. What a pair we must have made. Ovaka in his enormously oversized clothing, with comically large shoes slapping the sidewalk as he trudged home, and me in my teeny tiny Piggy crop top, stoically marching barefoot down the road whilst trying desperately not to make eye contact with any of the oncoming traffic. I felt so much shame. Shame at not being able to regulate my kids' emotions appropriately. Shame at not being able to catch Ovaka sooner. Shame at letting him run out into the night, ill-equipped to handle the cold. And incredible shame at the large, unsightly body that I was now exposing to the world. And I remember thinking to myself, as I made an effort to not spontaneously combust from the embarrassment of the situation, this must be what rock bottom feels like, having all of your very deepest insecurities exposed for all the world to see. Losing a spouse gives you repeated opportunities to be humbled by life, because it exposes your weaknesses and your shortcomings with cruel and unrelenting precision, and the person you relied upon to pick up the slack is just gone. There have been a surprising number of opportunities for me to feel like I might actually die since Finau's passing, where I felt like the stress of certain situations might give me a heart attack similar to the one that claimed Finau's life. Most days, I feel like I'm just one more stressful event from cardiac arrest. And on the Piggy shirt day, it definitely felt like death was imminent. But guess what? I didn't die of embarrassment. I didn't die of shame. I'm still here, wrapping my kids in whatever I have available to shield them from the elements and putting forth my best effort, whatever that looks like, no matter how seemingly ugly and unkempt it appears to the public. As I look back at this painful memory, I can't help but appreciate the comedic timing of the Piggy shirt. And I think honestly it saved me in that moment. I'm incredibly grateful for the serendipitous absurdity of that Piggy shirt. And I also feel so thankful that I've spent years choosing laughter in laugh or cry situations. Because instead of allowing this to be a crushing defeat, it has become instead yet another brief moment of joy in an otherwise incredibly dark time in our lives. Ovaka, like all of my children, has grown and changed so much in the nearly 5 years since his dad passed away. and is now a little better equipped to handle dead dad jokes and can choose to laugh at the unfathomable ridiculousness of the idea that someone you love can one day just be gone for the rest of your life. And although the definition of what constitutes okay definitely dropped a couple of notches on that cold, sad evening, Piggy Shirt Night reiterated the fact that whatever happens, we're gonna be okay. I'm Kalani, and this is my truth.